Hello and what is going on today, guys? Tomcat here, and I just got done watching the Forza Monthly stream, and there's a lot to talk about, both in regards to Forza Motorsport 7 and Forza Horizon 4. But in this video, we're mainly going to be focusing on the points for Forza Horizon 4, but there's going to be, obviously, some crossover between the two. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Now, the first thing I want to begin by talking about is the new Top Gear car pack coming to Forza Motorsport 7. Now, the Top Gear car pack has some really interesting cars in it. Obviously, we were correct on the 812 Superfast as well as the McLaren 720S. There's a few other cars that are super cool. The Porsche 904, everybody that guessed that was correct. With all the cars in this pack, though, I think my two main cars that I'm excited for, besides the 720S and the 812 Superfast, are the Vool and most definitely the Exomotive Exocet V8. So what's really cool about the Exomotive Exocet is that since they're based close to where I live, I get to see a lot of Exocets at track days. I've seen the V8 Exocet that the V8 Exocet in the game is based off of. I've seen that car, I've seen it go around the track. I've actually gotten the chance to sit in one, which was really cool, and I think that a lot of people don't really realize how cool those cars are. And one thing that was actually really interesting about the fact that, about how they announced it on the stream, is that there was a bit of confusion from the guys on the stream about whether or not it was street legal. Those cars are street legal. They are registerable as Miatas, and people will stick a plate on them and drive them on the street as a Miata. So they're pretty freaking amazing as far as what you can do in terms of, like, driving a vehicle like that on the street. Now, of course, it's the US, and really all you need here is, like, some resemblance of, like, a bumper and a windshield and headlights, taillights, and turn signals, and you're good to go. Now, depending on whether or not your area has, like, you know, emissions testing and stuff like that, that's a completely different side of the story. That's a completely different side of registering a car. But for all intents and purposes of most of the US, an Exocet would be street legal. Now, another big thing I wanted to talk about is the Formula Drift pack and the two cars that they actually announced and showed. Now, those two cars are this absolutely just badass Ute and Justin Pollock's Mustang. Now, it's interesting because we're seeing a crossover between Horizon 4 in autumn and then Motorsport 7 on what looks like one of the NASCAR circuits. Now, to be fair, I think that these cars are going to be well suited to both applications, although I think they are going to be used a little bit more in Forza Motorsport 7 just because people are going to be more inclined over there to replicate certain Formula D sections on certain tracks. Things like the Road Atlanta Horseshoe, for example. People are going to be all over that in these cars. People are going to be all over replicating that in these cars. Now, since we know two of the cars that are going to be running in the pack so far, I would love for you guys to take some guesses at what the rest of the cars are going to be. And personally, I have a few guesses, but I mean, I don't know if they're right or not because I have not seen the rest of the cars in the pack yet. Now, with that also being said, this pack proves to be one of the most incredible car packs that we've seen in the history of Forza. Now, to change the subject, well, not really to change the subject, but to move the current subject forward, the drift cars themselves. Now, these cars come preloaded with the new drift suspension setup. Now, according to what they said in the live stream, drift suspension will be another option next to race suspension. Now, this is talking about Horizon 4, obviously. So, drift suspension being right next to race suspension, for example, basically what it does is it's lower than race suspension, and whereas some of the other cars have about 30 to 40 degrees of steering angle, like from what they said, you're now going to have upwards of 50 degrees. Now, there was a little bit of confusion. Some people thought that they meant 50 degrees more than you have now, which would be, like, ridiculous. But no, just over 50 degrees of steering angle. Now, with that being said, there's going to be a lot of cars that you can apply this to. You can apply it from what they said, pretty much anything that isn't an off-road truck or a hypercar, which is pretty much 85 to 90% of the car list. So that's huge. Like, that's gigantic. I mean, by that logic, we'll be able to put it on everything from a Subaru BRZ to a Dodge Viper to a BMW M4 like I'm driving right now, to a older M3, to a C63 AMG, to, say, for example, a Alfa Romeo 8C Competizione. whatever you want to put it on, basically, as long as it's not like a hypercar or a race car, or maybe like an off-road truck or something, you can do it. Now, they also said that even though they don't normally tease features that they don't know if they're going to include in the game, they stated on the stream that they're in the process of developing and testing a drag suspension. Now, with that being said, the drag suspension, they said, would not be as widespread in terms of vehicle applications as the drift suspension. The drift suspension is going to be very widespread in terms of applications, whereas the drag suspension would be made mostly for muscle cars and other drag-focused vehicles, or cars that have a heavy drag racing presence, or something like that. Now, the drag suspension as a whole would basically take inspiration from the off-road suspensions in the way that they move and travel and extend or compress. Basically, the drag suspension would allow you to get that drag car squat when you launch and transfer all of that momentum and all of that power into the road, considering also the fact that they have drag tires coming to Horizon 4. So if the drag suspension ends up becoming a thing, which from the way they were talking, it sounded like it's a pretty likely expectation that they're going to bring it into the game, but probably not at launch. Well, almost definitely not at launch. The drift suspension will be in the game at launch, but the drag suspension is something that they will be saving for further on down the road, which I'm okay with, and I'm actually really impressed at the fact that they're willing to be super out there about things like this long before the game is even going to be released, which I think is incredible. I think that's absolutely incredible that they're willing to be a little bit more upfront with these things, and because in the past, they would never do that. In the past, these are things that they would never do, these are things that they would never touch on, and honestly, the biggest thing about that is like, oh, here, we're going to give you more to the community, and I think it's a smart move as well, because since the car list really just kind of got leaked out there, they're like, oh, well, why don't we reveal features instead? Because honestly, you know, every year when we get a motorsport game or a Horizon game, I mean, it's always cool finding out about the cars, but to be honest, there's a lot of cars that we all know are going to come back. I mean, we all know that at least 80 to 90% of the car list is going to come back, so really, we don't want to see the car list announced all over again, so much as we want to hear what features are new. I mean, at this point, we all have a pretty good idea or a pretty good library of what our perfect lineup of cars in a Forza game would be. For me, it's a massive long list, and I'm sure that for a lot of you guys, it is as well. I mean, like, it's one of those things where, you know, if you could own in real life, like, 30, 40, 50, 60 cars, of course you would. You know what I mean? Of course you would do it. Or more, hundreds of cars. If you could own hundreds of cars in real life, of course you would. Because there's something about just, like, not only, you know, collecting the cars, but having the option to just drive them and just rip in them whenever you wanted. Now, another thing that is interesting here, and they talked about a lot of stuff in this stream. They talked about a lot of stuff, but what I'm trying to touch on right now is the main points for me, and I think the highlights of what the stream spoke to for me. Now, they have also said that, I mean, you guys may know this, but they did touch on the fact that in Forza Motorsport 7, you will, after the coming update, you will be able to kick players. If you are the host of an online session, you will be able to kick a player at any point in a match, even if you are racing. So if someone is getting out of line and acting crazy, you can be like, nope, booted. So that's a really cool thing, I feel like, for people that like to host lobbies, or for people that have issues with people coming into their games and just wreaking havoc and crashing into people and just griefing. And honestly, giving the players that control really helps build a community around the racing, because it helps get the people that are just going to go nuts and ram into people out. Because really, that's all that that's what you want. When you're trying to have a clean race, somebody's, you know, messing it up, screwing it up, you want to get rid of that person. And that makes complete and total sense. It makes absolute complete and total sense. Now, the actual Top Gear Car Pack car list, I think, was a really good car list to me. I mean, you have the old Alpha, you have the 812, you have the 720S, you have the Vool, you have I almost said the Ariel. But no, I mean, it's a similar type of idea, but the Exo set. And I think, honestly, like, all across the board with those, they're all really, really cool. But with the update coming to the next update coming to Forza 7, you're also going to get 2 free Porsches, which my main favorite out of the 2 free Porsches was the brand new, either 2018 or 2019, I'm pretty sure 2019, GT3 RS. And the GT3 RS is probably my favorite modern Porsche. It always has been. If the GT3 RS is one of those cars to me that's like, yes, that is a driver's car, and I want it because it is a driver's car. It is built for nothing other than to be a driver's car that you can take to a mountain pass and absolutely enjoy the hell out of it, or take it to a track day and enjoy the absolute hell out of it, and grow with it as a driver, and have it teach you, and then you learn and grow with it. It's one of those cars to me that just speaks to me kind of on an emotional level, if I'm honest, and having that in the game is just so cool. And also, in the Top Gear car pack, speaking of Porsches, the Porsche 904, which I mentioned earlier, is another one of the really interesting cars. Now, the other Porsche that they showed that's going to be coming as a free car is a insanely detailed classic race car. Absolutely insanely detailed classic race car. And while I'm not the most familiar with this particular car, I do think that looking at it, I'm like, oh my god, I need to drive that. It's one of those cars that I look at and I'm going to be like, I need to drive it, and I'm sure I'll spend a lot of time in it. And I'm sure there's also going to be those Porsche people out there that are going to be like, oh my god, how dare you not know the absolute entire history of that car? You know nothing about cars. And I'm like, just because you don't know about one particular race car doesn't mean you are completely automotively illiterate. But regardless of that, that's just a little bit of that. I don't know where I was going with that spiel, but regardless, that car is going to be a blast to drive too. It looked really fast when they drove it on stream, except for the fact that John Iwana is slow. But we'll get to that later. And by the way, I'm just poking at you, dude. I'm just poking at you. That is no kind of attack. So, regardless of that, I'm very excited and very pumped up for everything that's coming into both Forza Motorsport 7 and Forza Horizon 4. And the really cool thing about Motorsport 7 is that the entire dev team, they have said the entire dev team is working on more features for Forza 7. And they said that moving forward, they almost want it to feel like the game is literally getting an expansion every month. And that's the way they worded it. Not the way I worded it. That is the way they worded it. So I am going to sit back and be very interested to see what they mean by that. So if you guys enjoyed this video, which was packed full of updates in regards to Forza Horizon 4 and Forza Motorsport 7, don't forget to click that like button. Tell me in the comments below what you guys thought of it. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time. Talk to y'all later.